it will be difficult to keep up with that rate of increase in the index year after year, but we hope to ensure that that growth continues. RTGS, NEFT, and these payment systems are available round the clock. What that has achieved is tremendous. 24/7 RTGS has actually given settlement efficiency a new meaning. Instead of doing 2 or 3 settlements in a day, we actually can do 8 or 10 settlements in a day. Interbank transactions can take place outside market hours, which basically means access to global markets has improved because settlement can happen through the payment systems in India. Direct benefit transfers can happen on any day. In fact, the transfers that were done in one day during the pandemic would normally have taken probably a month to put in effect, if not longer. So that is the scale of efficiency that we have achieved there. More than 20,000 billers are on the Bharat bill payment system, which basically means now and going forward this will be improved. We can actually access virtually any bill payment that exists, just sitting at your home. No more going into lines, or no more even opening up different merchants' apps to make those payments. We are trying to open that up to the Indian diaspora outside India as well now, as has been recently announced. There are some 200 million QR codes, about 7 million POS machines that have been deployed. 14 million touch points, both QR codes and POS machines, have been covered under the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, which RBI has set up in collaboration with industry participants, banks, card networks, and so on. So all in all, the progress has been, to say the least, satisfactory, and we, as we have shown it, as we have indicated it in the recent vision document that we put that out periodically. That is something that we hope to carry forward. Now, this progress that is evident in these numbers that I have talked about is made possible by the thriving fintech industry that we have there, the products that they have come up with, the use cases that they have thought of, and the technologically superior solutions that they have given to these use cases couldn't have come unless we had a tech industry which is really up to what we expect and more. Obviously, finance minister has talked about the India stack. Government has done immensely to help this digital payments ecosystem take off with Aadhaar, with the Jan Dhan system of having making sure that everyone has a bank account, and many other initiatives that have been taken. Reserve Bank has played its part. Reserve Bank has been thinking about technology assimilation in the financial system for a long time. It is more than 20 years back that we set up IDRBT, which played some leading roles in terms of technology absorption in the ATM sector and others earlier. But this process of institution creation to give force to the innovative impulses in the economy has continued even after IDRBT. NPCI has been created in between. The Clearing Corporation of India Limited has been created, which has transformed risk management in the financial ecosystem. The IFTAS, which has been created a little more recently. Now, all these are institutions most of you would have heard of because of the products that they have created, because of the fillip that they have given to the digital payments ecosystem, and the initiatives that they are taking now, whether it's in making Indian payment system international or further. RBI's efforts are fundamentally focused on creation of an innovative and orderly fintech environment. That basically involves laying down rules. Sometimes rules are not not really to the liking of everyone, but our experience has been that we have been able to convince the industry, we have been able to convince the participants, the stakeholders, that while it is inconvenient in the initial stages, it is all to the good. I still remember maybe 10, 12 years back when we introduced two-factor authentication, which, by the way, is still not the standard in many countries. There was a bit of a hue and cry about the time that it takes, about the systemic changes that are required, about the cost that will impose. But this is something that has probably been the single most factor in enhancing customer confidence in our payment systems. We have taken that forward recently by extending it, for example, to recurring payments. After the initial friction, again, as I said, the system has got used to. Not only domestic merchants, but a very large number of international merchants have also come on board. We are also taking the feedback and trying to calibrate policies so that it meets the requirements of not just the merchants in the business, but also the consumers. We try and promote the creative spark in the technology industry, in the startup ecosystem that we have. We do our bit in terms of not just the regulatory sandboxes and identifying themes that are of primary significance at any point in time, through which we can actually give a boost to technological activity in that field. We have been doing that through the regulatory sandboxes. We have set up the Reserve Bank of India Innovation Hub, which is expected to be a melting point where regulatory requirements, regulatory priorities can be taken forward in consultation with the industry, with the startup community, with academicians, with with banks, with fund issuers, and so on. Recently, we had announced one of their first initiative in terms of the Kisan credit card loan process, which which we expect can be done, instead of being done in days or maybe a month, can be done in a few minutes. This is just the beginning. They're working on a lot of other things. They're receiving a lot of inputs from the industry. They're based in Bangalore, which is probably the best place to base yourself in these matters. So giving technology a boost, giving industry a boost is the way we look at regulating this sector. The third and most important point is obviously customer confidence. We just have to make sure that customer feels confident about participating in the digital payment system. This is probably one of the areas we need to work more when we think of the divide between India and Bharat, the rural India and the urban India, urban, semi-urban India. If you have to extend it at the scale that we have seen it in urban India into the rural India, the comfort with technology has to improve. Now, this is something we take a lot of effort in ensuring. We try and assure users at every stage that your interests are safe, your data is safe, your privacy is safe. That's broadly where that's broadly the focus of our regulations. As we go forward from this, from this, I would say, a happy place where we have achieved, what we expected, and we hope to, continue this. As we go forward, I think there are a few areas that we are focusing on, which I think I would discuss here, just to put that out so that there can be a dialogue that happens. The first thing is that we have to scale it up. We have to scale up while preserving systemic integrity. That essentially means technical stability. It just doesn't mean that the technical failures of transactions have to be minimized. It also means that transactions themselves have to inspire confidence. We cannot have too many instances of frauds. While the number of frauds in absolute terms has been increasing, and we are attending to that. We are trying to do the best we can there, and we are consulting industry in working out innovative ways of tackling that. While the absolute number is going up, in terms of percentage of transaction, it is still extremely minimal. But never a bad idea to ensure that that percentage goes down even further to boost consumer confidence. Fraud management is an area that we also need to focus on if we have to scale it up. The second aspect is inclusion that we have to pay particular attention to. We did realize that not everyone has a smartphone, which is essential for using technologies like UPI. So we took particular interest in coaxing the ecosystem to develop products that can be used on feature phones, that can be used when you do not have connectivity, and such solution. There was recently the launch of the UPI 123 Pay, where you have various technologies. I think there were 3 that were there at the time of launch. A few more have been added, I understand, going in the last few weeks. This gives various alternatives to people who do not have a smartphone to actually use UPI for making their transactions. Now, whether it's the ubiquitous missed call, which is very Indian, or it is IVR, or it is proximity sound-based technology, which is actually a fairly exciting technology that we have been seeing in this area. The third is, of course, innovation. I have talked about it in terms of what RBIH has been, Reserve Bank of India Innovation Hub has been doing. But this innovative impulse is something that we would want the industry to rise up to. So far, they have risen up to whatever has been expected of them by the government, by the regulators, or by the consumers. We want this process to continue, and I'm confident, given the skills we have in India, in this area, that is a process that we will continue encouraging and that will continue delivering. Security, yes, the thing about security that we need to understand is there's never a moment when we feel we are secure enough, because that is the moment you get vulnerable. So we have to keep working on it, whether it's cyber security or any other security threats that we might have. We have to look at infrastructural stability. Government itself has taken various steps in terms of critical infrastructure. We are also cooperating with that. Data security, and probably importantly, a stronger compliance culture. I do understand that no regulated entity loves compliance, but this has to be done. This has to be done to maintain a level playing field. Occasionally, this might, create a bit of readjustment in the business that you do. At those points, we are not the most likely, most loved, people for those who are involved. But then, the thing I will exhort is that, let's work together. Let's keep adjusting, keep calibrating. But I'm sure we can reach a position where there would be a realization that regulatory compliance in general is something that is in the best interest for the industry to grow in an orderly fashion. And finally, internationalization. This is something that we have been trying. We have been trying country by country. We have been trying to get groups of countries where we can popularize UPI in those countries, which will not only give a bridge to the large number of Indians staying outside, but it can give a bridge to payment systems across. So it's not just about, the story is not about Indians, as Finance Minister said, but the story is about the best systems being made available to everyone, and let people have a choice. Let users have a choice. On the issue of CBDC, which we will be launching in pilots, launching this year. as announced in the budget. On the issue of CBDC, we have to understand that internationalization of CBDC is crucial to addressing the payments issue that international bodies are dealing with now, G20, BIS, FSB, which is cross-border payments. Now, while we have excellent, cheap, fast domestic payments almost everywhere, cross-border payments still are stuck probably in the last century. The cost at which those transactions happen, notwithstanding the exchange risk involved, is something that leaves a lot of scope for improvement. The speed at which those happen, that leaves a lot of scope for improvement. The reason I bring that up now is CBDC is probably, in my view, the most efficient answer to this. Just think of this, India has CBDC, US has CBDCs, the systems talk to each other. We don't have to wait for for banks to be during their operating hours to settle transactions. We don't need the central banks on either side to be open to get finality of settlement. That massively takes out the settlement risk from cross-border transactions. That reduces time, that reduces cost. So CBDC, internationalization is something that I'm looking forward to going forward. I think I have already taken a little bit more time than has been allotted to me. I would stop there and maybe get down to a bit of discussion. Thank you.
Deputy Governor Sankar, that was terrific. You outlined a number of areas where I think there's an opportunity for the industry to play a very significant role. Look, I'm not going to state the obvious 16 times more. We all know how fast this economy is growing. We all know that in the digital space, the transformation has been nothing short of amazing. But as you outlined, in very practical terms, there's still a lot of work to be done in India. As you think about first off, as you think about India's role as a potential global hub for innovation and, of course, in the digital payment space and the importance to the financial sector, by the way, which touches on every other sector, right? Health, agriculture, all rely on, increasingly on digital. Tell us a little bit about what your vision is, a little bit more specific on those 6 elements where the private sector is really needed. And for this crowd, where we are able to contribute. So, for example, you talked about building up confidence within the culture, right, here in India. So how can the private sector contribute to that? And in the area of security and building security confidence, that's a role for the private sector as well. Of course, innovation is another role. So tell us a little bit more about what your vision is for the private sector's contribution to India's transformation in the digital payment space.
Yeah, in one word, crucial. The way we have evolved in the payments ecosystem, as in financial regulation and financial markets development as well, is that we always followed a consultative approach. As a regulator, as someone who wants to develop an ecosystem, we can probably give the guidance in terms of the larger objectives, but the use cases, the products, the innovative energy has to come from the private sector, as it has come in India, as I have highlighted, a little bit in my talk. We depend a lot on the private sector in terms of the products that they come up with, in terms of connecting the last mile to the consumer, in terms of the contribution that they can make to the inclusion agenda. That is important not just in India but globally. Having said that, I would probably just want to highlight that while private sector has been measuring up, and I see no reason why they cannot even improve on that in the future, I think we just have to keep in mind that while business objectives are important, we always need to keep them in mind. We also need to keep in mind that in the long run, a customer will probably get a good sense of his own well-being, his own privacy, and the efficiency of the various competitive products that are given in the private sector. And therefore, in the long run, the private sector or those technologies will thrive, which the customers are most comfortable in accessing. So, I would say that focus a little more on inclusion and little more on the consumer requirements, the user requirements.
So the U.S. India Business Council is made up of companies that are obviously very invested in the growth of the digital space, digital connectivity, and obviously digital payments. Are there specific things that you would like from us in this consultation process, obviously in the education, bringing new products, new services? You mentioned your own way of touching upon consumer privacy and all those issues. What can we contribute specifically to helping you? Are there things that you would recommend to this crowd, members of the U.S. India Business Council, that we should be doing that we aren't today doing?
Without quite getting into, the specific areas, I think suffices it to say that U.S. has been the origin of virtually all major technological innovations or inventions that we have seen in the last 40 years. The largest, the so-called big tech is essentially U.S. companies. There is a lot of technology emanating from there that we can actually use. Not just India, but various other countries can use. While we do have a fairly thriving technology sector here, I think we would both stand to gain, if there is a give and take in terms of the technologies available here. If, for example, we can learn how big tech, US is looking at that now, how big tech regulations can be done, because that is something that is equally important for us. If you look at UPI, about 80% of the transactions are concentrated in just two entities, both big tech. One of them big tech, the other is a fairly large player otherwise. So US is addressing that issue now. This is something that we are looking keenly towards Europe to understand how we need to assimilate them even more effectively in the payment system without there being any, in complete synergy with the regulatory objectives. UPI is something that I think can work wonders anywhere, even in the US. So we would see internationalization of UPI in the US more, not just among the diaspora, but generally.
Well, we need regulatory cooperation. And part of that is the two governments working together. And also there are other actors, as you alluded to. Europe is another actor, Japan, and Australia. But the United States, with its technological, innovative system, provides, I think, a basis for expanding in this area between the United States and India cooperation. We have put forward the recommendation that there be a tech council, so to speak, between India and the United States to look at the digital rules and to include in that digital payment transactions. One of the areas we think that needs to be covered is something you alluded to, cross-border data transactions, which, by the way, affect a lot of Indians who want to bring remittances back to India. What's your vision for how we look to the two governments to work together, whether it's through IPAP or through a separate bilateral corridor or in addition to, and how the private sector can be a contributor to that process?
Idea of a technology council is obviously very good. It helps if we formalize the mechanism through which these discussions can go in a regular, orderly manner. Yes, any such body would be useful. You see, the point we have to realize, someone said that data is the lifeblood of technology. I don't know whether it was you who said it.
It is the line we often use, and it is true. Actually, it was our chairman who said it, but it is absolutely accurate.
Yeah, personally, I would probably say technology and data is the lifeblood of business.
Right.
You see, the point about data is that data is rich where population is big. That's something I think businesses have realized, and that is something that we need to keep in mind. India is, the second largest populated country in the world.
Soon to be the largest.
Let's hope not. But then, it is incumbent on the regulator and the government to ensure that while this data, to the extent it can be used for businesses and products that will, that will in turn help in activity, help in growth, help in expanding the economy, help in bringing efficiency into the economy. We just have to ensure that the use of the data is visible, is transparent, is under control. I'm not really thinking of a dystopian or Orwellian future, but then it would serve us well if the movement of data and the control of data is well organized between these two countries globally. I think this is an area on which there has to be a clear understanding among the governments, because the basic rules will have to be formed at a legal level.
Well, I think one of the concerns that we have is that you have the need for Europe, the United States, India, Japan, Australia, and other like-minded countries to get together to help form a more cohesive approach on standards, on cross-border data flows, and issues like that that will project out a more appropriate digital payment system. In that regard, look, I think it's clear from your comments there's still more work to be done within India, but does India aspire to be a global innovative hub for digital payment transactions? And if so, what can we do again to contribute to that growth and that potential?
I would like to think that India is already, one of the more important hubs in terms of global payment technology that is evolving. But the point is, payment sector, the economy are moving so fast, especially the role of technology in transforming, known processes for delivery of products, whether it's banking or, bond markets or anything, is so vast and so uncertain that it would serve everyone well, globally, every country well, if we clearly, can work out a roadmap based on which we would actually, go ahead developing this ecosystem. I think what I would basically like to say is that with so much of data moving across, and we all know APIs, for example, but, APIs can work wonders here. It would be a good idea if, we standardize API protocols across countries, just as an example. Now, this is something that we need to do so that every country is on the, on the same page in terms of...
And I'm worried that we're beginning to see fragmentation in that regard.
Yes. In fact, API fragmentation is something that we would need to avoid. So is fragmentation in case of data standards, privacy standards.
Yep.
We have seen, what fragmentation of tax standards has done to international financial system. We have seen how flows have happened to, places that has not been the most desirable in many instances. We do not want that happening in the technology or payment space.
So how do we avoid it? Can we avoid it?
Cooperation, coordination. I think bodies like G20 can play a big role. BIS, for example, in terms of whatever is in its remit, is playing a role in terms of standardizing. So it is important that there is a shared understanding on how these standards will evolve eventually. I'll give you an example. Let's say cryptocurrencies or stable coins, if I want to be a little more specific. How US looks at stable coins is very different from how, for example, an emerging economy would look at a stable coin. Now, US would look at that as any other product which can, probably give a lot of efficiency to cross-border payments or other payments. The way an emerging economy which has capital controls, which has its own currency, which is not as ubiquitous as, let's say, the US dollar will look at is what happens to my currency, what happens to my monetary policy.
Yep.
So now, in this sort of a space, it serves all of us well if US has an understanding of the requirement, US or developed economies have an understanding of the requirement of emerging economies and vice versa. And that can happen if we, gradually go around developing standard protocols in terms of how these things evolve. Maybe, like you said, technology council or something, or standard bodies through which all these issues or concerns can be articulated.
So if we're looking out 5 years from today, and we're back on this stage 5 years from now. What's going to be different in India? How much penetration will there be in the digital space? Because it's a large country, and as you said, it's about access for a number of people who don't have access to technology. So how much can you advance the change there inside the country? And how much can you see the U.S. India corridor really advancing for the cooperation that we seek? And then where do we go on the global stage? 5 years from now, what will it look like? India first, U.S. India, then global.
Yeah, while I'm not an oracle, I'm not
I'm
saying...
asking you to give us a vision. And that's
I'm not saying, I'm sure, the numbers I read out, these would be far more impressive, but that's not really what I'm, looking at. 5 years forward in India, I'm looking at a digital payment ecosystem where everyone, right, from the, from the farmer who cannot read and write English, for example, to the most sophisticated person staying in the cities. Everyone is as comfortable with one version or the other, one choice or the other of payment systems. The payment system utopia, in a sense, the payment system equilibrium, I think that's a better word. Payment system equilibrium is one where efficiency in the economy, in terms of movement of goods, in terms of trading of goods, is maximized. Is the movement and the efficiency of those payments is maximum. Now, whether that involves UPI, whether that involves some other payment system, or whether that involves cash, I think at the end of the day, everyone needs to have a choice. If a customer prefers cash for whatever reason, even that should be available.
So you see cash in our future for a while?
I'm not particularly very enthused by a cashless society. I think I would more be enthused by providing the customer with a viable set of alternatives. Let the customer decide. If the customer feels, I don't need to use cash, we should provide him a system where the customer doesn't need to use cash. If some customer wants to, many developed countries, you see this. There is a general preference for cash as well. So, that also we see in some other places, which is one reason digital payments haven't gotten as much in those jurisdictions. It is a matter of customer choice. Let the customer decide. In terms of U.S., obviously it has a big lead. It has a huge advantage in terms of technology, in terms of an ecosystem that gives this technology the boost to expand. But then, I would like to see technology evolution framework in the U.S., which is sensitive to the requirements of the globe, requirements of emerging economies, requirements of other economies in that sense. I see a huge amount of cooperation between the industry on both sides going forward, and that will happen most effectively when each of us understands not only our own interests, which is important, of course, but each of us understands the interests of the other.
Deputy Governor Sankar, we're going to leave it there. I want to just leave with a couple thoughts. First of all, on your philosophical point up front, we need to increase digital connectivity, make it inclusive, but we also need to keep the human touch. And so we think it's a conjunction, not an either-or statement. So I think it's important to keep the touch, and it's important to make sure that we continue to drive towards innovative societies, bring more inclusiveness to it. The financial sector is one of the beneficiaries of the incredible change going on in this country, but there are many other sectors that are also equally touched by what's going on here in terms of digital payment space. If I could leave you with a thought, the U.S. India Business Council, through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and through all of our member companies, want to be a part of this system. We want to contribute to the vision that you laid out and to the vision of your government. And we want to be there at the beginning of this process, through the consultations, as you develop your rules and regulations, encourage stronger cooperation and coordination between the United States and India. We want to advance some areas of cooperation there. IPAF is one of the paths to do it in, but we also think there needs to be a U.S.-India direct path in this regard. And you have the commitment of us to not only encourage our own government, but even to probe and promote that while we're also being a part of your vision and helping India succeed here in creating a dynamic economy that is inclusive and brings people the opportunity to utilize these new tools. Thank you very much for being here today. Please give the Deputy Governor a round of applause.
Thank you very much for that informative address, Mr. T. Rabi Sankar, and for that great discussion with Mr. Myron Brilliant. May I please invite upon stage Ambassador Keshav, and may I please request Ambassador Keshav and Mr. Myron Brilliant to present a green certificate to the Deputy Governor of the RBI, Mr. T. Rabi Sankar. This is an initiative of the India Idea Summit. A cluster of 5 trees will be planted on behalf of the Deputy Governor. Can I have a round of applause, please? A warm round of applause to thank Mr. Rabi Sankar for taking out the time to speak to us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. Up next, we have a panel on leveraging the payment revolution, digital strategies for expanding prosperity and inclusion. Please welcome our esteemed panelists, Pemi Burt, Head of Public Policy and Government Affairs, APAC at Stripe, and Mr. Rajesh Kumar, India Managing Director and CEO at TransUnion. The discussion will be moderated by Parikshit Luthra, the Delhi Bureau Chief for CNBC TV 18. Anyway, I hand over the session to you, Parikshit.